Hello and welcome to this latest TMT Talks with me, Oisín Lunny, brought to you and produced by the team at TMT Analysis. In this episode, we'll be discussing the big topic of mobile security and identity, and why there's a need for better security and identity management when doing everything from onboarding new customers to managing and engaging with existing ones. And I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Bird, the Chief Product Officer at Sexeta, as well as a senior fellow with the Cyber Theory Zero Trust Institute, a Forbes Tech Council member, and host of the awesome Who the Bleep Are You podcast. Richard, welcome to TMT Talks.
Oisín, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome, and I'm loving the music theme in the background, the guitars, the festival posters. Tick, tick, tick. You are absolutely already an exemplary TMT Talks guest. But talk to us a bit about your interest in security and identity. Where did it all start, and you know, what brings you here today?
Well, I would say that, like all good stories, my background in cybersecurity and my career in cybersecurity started by accident and with alcohol. I you actually have to reel back quite a ways. I've been 20 plus years in the corporate side, and I came into the corporate technology trades completely by accident, and alcohol was involved, tequila in that particular instance. Somebody that was running an organization realized that I was a construction project manager, which was originally where I came from after I left the military. And he said, if you can run a construction project for little companies like Walmart, which is who I worked for at the time as a kid, he said, you can manage a mainframe migration. And I didn't know the difference between a mainframe and a toaster oven. And that gave my first tranche of background in IT operations. I went from that experience to ultimately becoming a chief information officer. And then, economic collapse, and had an opportunity to change gears again and get into the very beginnings of information security. And I always say by accident, alcohol was involved because it was another discussion, another party conversation. Longtime boss of mine, fantastic chief security officer now in the banking industry. She said, "Hey, I don't have anybody to run identity. Would you like to do that?" And I didn't realize it's because I was the only one dumb enough to say yes. I had no background or knowledge in identity. Now it's going on 15 years, and now I have this rather ridiculous resume as a result of being fascinated and passionate about this particular security domain. And it took about 10 years of struggle to become the overnight sensation that I am, which is, it's just a reflection of the challenges that you face with identity and how disrespected and how underinvested the security control it is. And yet, now things are changing dramatically. Whether it's the way that security is managed, or what the foundations of security are, or what we see in the news every day.
Oh, absolutely. And indeed, you recently gave a presentation with a very relatable title for me personally. It was called People Are No Good at Security. So what did you mean by that title? What's your kind of take on that?
Well, I think that I have spent, and a lot of it's probably because I was a non-traditional technologist. I came in from I went into the military, liberal arts degree, political science, international relations theory, and kind of all of that strangeness. And I look for patterns in real life, and I always say you look for patterns in the analog to understand how they should be created, or avoid creating the same mistakes in the digital. And when we look at this idea that people are no good at security, that's historical. That's based on evidence and data. And I always like to use the insurance example. The vast percentage of burglary losses in the United States specifically, something like 86% of burglary losses are a result of somebody not locking their door. No break-in, no broken glass, no alarm systems, just simply not locking their doors. It accounts for 86% of the insurance losses for burglary. Now, I don't know about you, right? But, we're sitting talking about, advanced stuff like biometrics and multi-factor authentication, and we're dealing with human beings that actually still leave their doors unlocked. And last I checked, there really isn't any necessary security awareness training to explain to people why locked doors are better than unlocked doors, right? But human beings have this this characteristic of extending trust so frequently that they really aren't understanding the exposures that they have. When we get into the digital world, it gets worse because one of the things that I said in that presentation is the difference between your house doors not being locked or unlocked, and the difference between your digital life not being secure is that there are many actors, particularly in big tech, who are aggressively taking steps to reduce or basically eliminate the capability for you to invoke security and control over your own stuff because it's profitable for them. So now in the digital space, it gets more complicated because there are ulterior motives, not by criminals, but ulterior motives by enterprise organizations that have revenue dependencies on monetizing your privacy and security.
Yeah, so some incredible stuff happening very much in the corporate world. Our identities are more and more digital. And this is big news at the moment because at the time of recording, news has come out of PayPal admitting that 4.5 million accounts were illegitimately created. What's your take on this?
The way that it got reported was in in their quarterly briefing to analysts. It was in their financial reporting. They came out and said, "Oh, by the way, 4.5 million fraudulent accounts during the COVID period," and oops. And I think that what's really fascinating is that this is why it's hard to be an identity. And this is for all of my fellow practitioners and solution providers and anybody around the world that's interested in the identity topic. This is why it's difficult because the way that messaging came out, it said, "Oh, look at us, poor PayPal. We were taken advantage of from a fraudulent account creation standpoint." Well, look, how how poor do your control processes need to be to allow the creation of 4.5 million identities? And then the other piece that they come across with and they say, well, and that exposed us to fraudulent transactions. They never actually make the outward statement that says our failure in cybersecurity controls related to identity resulted in the creation of 4.5 million accounts, which then led to fraudulent transactions. Still today in the business world, fraud is talked about as if it's some kind of disassociated transaction or event outside of all other cybersecurity controls. Many corporations still have fraud organizations separate from cybersecurity organizations, separate from investigation or criminal investigation capabilities and coordinations with organizations. Like they're all still separate, right? Because somehow we still think that some dude's hammering out copper plates where you slide the triple part carbon across it, when everything in the e-commerce world that's related to fraud is because of a failure of cybersecurity. So I think that it's real interesting to see how PayPal is trying to mitigate the damage from these announcements. But I think one thing that we really should consider is that PayPal just proved that the vast majority of enterprises around the world are probably understating their risk. Certainly, the shareholders felt that way when the stock dropped by 25% in one day, based upon that announcement in their financials. But there's our risk programs are simply modeling what we think is going to happen to us, and I don't think that PayPal ever had a risk model that says 4.5 million fraudulent transactions, 25% reduction in our stock valuation. I bet they didn't have that risk plan in place.
And you mentioned e-commerce there, and of course that's just going through the roof during the lockdown. Do you think that companies need to actually spend more time identifying and verifying who their customers actually are on the back of the lockdown?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing some really interesting dynamics in the marketplace that are clearly indicating that companies have to do that. It's in a couple of different parts. I mean, the first is that we're beginning now because of, I call it the Apple effect, right? We're beginning now because of Apple's path the last 4 years to differentiate competitively based upon security and privacy. I always like to pause there, right? First of all, they're not doing it, altruistically. They have some expectation of returns there. I don't think $1 trillion plus company goes, we're just going to provide security and privacy and not expect anything in return. So that's the cynical part of the equation that I often get questioned on. The second is whether or not they're actually able to do it, aside from this idea of what's causing pressures in the market, the Apple effect is creating situations where companies are having to make stated positions on security and privacy and where they stand. We know where Facebook stands, strongly against Apple's model, right? And we know where Amazon stands, not strongly against, but we know in the background that they're actively engaged with tremendous amounts of dollars and lobbying to protect their positions relative to the association of security and privacy to their customers. The less that they have here and there, the less friction that they have within their e-commerce transactions. So we're seeing kind of these really interesting Titanic, kind of maneuvers that are going on. But more importantly, we're clearly seeing legislators that are pushing open business, open banking accords, pushing customer data rights down in Australia, and it's greatly changing how we're expected to manage all of these people that are supposedly supposed to be in relationship with us, customers, in kind of the B2C model. But we've done a very, very poor job for the last 30 or 40 years, right? We've just simply created an account or password. We don't know if that's really the person. We don't even understand, kind of the risk exposures that we have. We're starting to see fines escalate. And the last piece that I would say about this that is becoming very, very clear is in the cyber insurance space, where these exposures and the resulting damages that are happening economically are causing cyber insurance policies to or cyber insurance providers to finally take a step back and go, do we really understand the dimensions of what we're insuring? Do we really understand all the weaknesses and weak links within all of these systems and all of these processes and these connections with the customers? Are we ready to be the next one to pay out a multi-$100 billion fine because of a GDPR violation? And I think the answer is clearly coming back from the cyber insurance industry. No, we are not interested in that. And we're seeing some really dramatic changes in expectations in order to be able to even secure a policy. So I think there's just so many things going on right now that are making it really, really clear that the inadequate management of people, human beings, I don't like to call them customers, people's identities in their relationship with e-commerce entities is just grossly insufficient.
Mm. Yeah, strong agree, as they say online. And you've just explored the mega trend of digitization and e-commerce happening during the lockdown. But of course, we've seen massive growth in mobile traffic during the lockdowns as well. Do you think, how has that increased specifically the need for better security and better identification of customers and mobile users?
Yeah, for certain, the need for better identification, not just of individuals, but of the devices that they're associated with. I mean, this is a fracture that we keep you know kind of spackling over, which I think is unfortunate, right? The reality, the Zero Trust Institute was mentioned. A good friend of mine is John Kindervag, the founder of Zero Trust. The reality is that we're making a differentiation between devices and packets and not recognizing the reality that those are all either engines for or direct proxies for our human real life self in the digital world, right? And because of this fracture, we're not creating tight binds and ties between devices and humans, the humans that are using them, because we don't do that. Like we saw a massive escalation of SIM swapping schemes and all other kinds of mobile-based fraud that was, accelerated on a kind of a parallel pathway with the explosion of mobile device utilization during the COVID period. And also, I think it's really important to remember that there's no going back. There's no putting this toothpaste back in the tube relative to consumer behaviors on these digital devices. The reason being is it's kind of like the old saying back in World War One. Once they've left once they've been to Paris, how do you get them back on the farm, right? And that's our reality. When we've now really understood remote work, the possibilities and capabilities there, the breaking down of walls of cultural bias against the ability to go here and work from there. Once we started to break that down, we may scale back a little bit in volume, but it's just going to continue to move from here up and to the right, making it all the more important that we get this identity ascription and identity management down correctly.
And you talk about many, many fascinating issues on your podcast. Who the bleep are you? Talk to us a bit about about the podcast. How do people find it? Who do you speak to? What do you like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just look for us on all of the podcast distribution channels.
Yeah.
I'll give the quick backstory to it. I came from the last 3 years of my working career, having been the chief customer information officer for Ping Identity. And actually, it's been fantastic for me because Ping created an opportunity now for me to go into an operationalized function in solutions. And I love it because I can tell you that the number of people that have been on the operator side of the equation in the enterprise, the number that have been in any kind of advisory role from a consulting standpoint to agencies, organizations, governments, and the companies, and then been on the solution side, for that combination and identity, I can tell you to my knowledge, it's a half dozen men and women around the world. Very, very few of us that have been in all three of those locations. And I think it gives us an informed perspective in each one of those personas. And that was really what the whole who the heck are you it was supposed to be about. But when I was at Ping, I was the host for Hello User podcast. And I had actually pitched the name, who the heck are you, to the group when we were coming up with the names, and they said, well, it's a little too edgy, doesn't fit the brand, which I agree with. So I took it upon myself to stand it up, and I do like it. I mean, if you're a techie, you'll understand that the hash symbols can be anything that you want them to be, especially if you're a crypto person. They can represent anything that you want them to be. And I think that that's an interesting reality about identity. We have this ability in the digital world to be anybody who we want to be, probably much easier than the analog. And it's really about talking through all of those kind of consequences and issues, and hopefully really having a lot of fun with a lot of different guests. I like to get people on my podcasts that have no background in cybersecurity, no background in identity, and then kind of watch them connect the dots when we start talking about their digital life versus their analog life. And watch them connect the dots about the camera being on their Alexa, and or their Ring doorbell, providing feeds to whomever, and they start to connect those dots and really understand how they're weaved into this challenging fabric in this digital universe, and what their digital identity means.
I love it. Okay, I'll be tuning into that for sure. And on your profile and a few bios that I've seen online, it refers to you as the most tattooed man in mobile and cybersecurity. So, talk to us a bit about your collection of tattoos. How long have you been getting them? How many do you have? Is there any that you can share with us? Keep it clean, obviously. If you could share with our viewers the TMT talks.
I put myself squarely in the top 5%. I would never say I'm number one. My tattoo story is like a lot of, frankly, I will make a declarative statement about tattoos and the technology trades. I
Yeah.
do think that more people in cybersecurity have tattoos than in any other slice of technology. Um, and, and I think some of my colleagues might not like what I'm about to say, but I think it's because it's just like being in any other form of enforcement. You're half a criminal and half a good guy, right?
So tell us, when you're not getting inked or working on your tattoos, what kind of things do you like to do to chill out, take a break from the world of mobile and cybersecurity?
Yeah, most of my hobbies are what I truly love, and my work is simply to fund those hobbies. So I
Nice.
do a lot of music festivals globally. Relatively new for me. Suffered a family tragedy and had one of those kind of situations where you did that life evaluation, and I realized that I had been a young father, very young, and in the course of being a very young father, kind of all of those experiences that you have in your early and late 20s, I didn't have. I didn't go to tons of concerts, and I didn't go hang out and crash on people's couches. I was, raising a couple of kids and trying to get through school and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I met my wife now, and she was a big music fan, and I have always been a big music fan. I started out first playing saxophone, and by the time I was about 9 or 10 years old, I was listening to John Coltrane and Miles Davis and Cannonball Adderley, and yeah,
Wow.
and from there, And I always like to, remind people it's not as big a leap as you think. From there, I became a very early American adopter of punk rock music.
Sweet.
Because if you listen to John Coltrane and Miles Davis, you know that kind of new and avant-garde jazz was the original punk music. And then we just established this love. We started going to music festivals. I've been to over 35 in the last 5 years, including the COVID years, and getting ready to go to one in February. And beyond that, I have this really strange hobby of collecting full bars in my house. So I have a tiki bar, I have a whiskey and scotch bar, then I have a small bar upstairs for all the good stuff, and
Oh my
and
God.
I a friend of mine who was a bartender that I've actually mentored in cybersecurity, and is now in his first position. He was 18 years a barman. Fortunately, he had gotten his first in mathematics, so it was kind of we could get him into cybersecurity. He came over to my house one day, and I was mixing him a mai tai, and he said, "That's the most amazing thing." He goes, "I'm a barman that wants to be in cybersecurity, and you're a guy in cybersecurity that wants to be a barman." So those are kind of the things that help me decompress quite a bit. So
Oh, fantastic. You're a man after my own heart. I mean, whenever you're in Barcelona, one, there's a great music festival called Primavera Sound, Fontaine's DC, a great punk band from Dublin who I think you'd love if you haven't heard them already. And there's a wonderful, wonderful tiki bar over here just near Plaza Catalunya. So give me a shout when you're over. But let's get Fergal from TMT Talks over as well. And we'll have a
I
few
think
Mai
it's a great
Tais.
idea. And
Awesome. Fantastic.
Primavera is definitely on our list.
Oh,
Um,
it's the best.
yeah,
It's absolutely the best. And you'd love the Barcelona Jazz Festival as well. That's just sublime. So Maceo Parker there a few years ago. But speaking of music, I mean, we're both obviously music nuts. In this room, there's a huge wall of vinyl over there, some guitars over there, slightly out of shot. We have a very special TMT Talk Spotify playlist, and we invite all of our VIP guests to choose a track and kind of make their mark, leave their signature ink on the playlist. Would you like to add a track to our TMT Talk Spotify playlist?
there's no group that really reflects my own growth and evolution, and there's no song that probably describes my career intentions better than Beastie Boys' Sabotage.
Killer choice. Killer. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, listen, thank you so much for joining us on the latest TMT Talks with myself, Oisin Lunny. Many thanks to the legend that is Richard Bird for sharing his tips on tiki cocktails, music, cybersecurity, and mobile, and this amazing new digitized world that we live in. Richard, that was so brilliant to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the time. Truly enjoyed it, and looking forward to catching up with you in Barcelona.
For sure, for sure. Folks at home, thank you for joining us for this edition of TMT Talks. Thank you for listening and watching. Don't forget, you can carry on the discussions via the hashtag TMT Talks, or you can email me at ushin@tmtanalysis.com or post a comment on the TMT Analysis YouTube channel. We can also carry on. We'll fight for our right to party and via the special TMT Analysis mixtape on Spotify. It's going to be linked in the show notes. Be sure to have a listen, and I will see you next time.